Stargate SG1 is steeped in dystopia. The very structure of the show is something of an inversion of Star Trek: The Next Generations. In the beginning of the show, rather than following a utopian society at its apex, welcoming the worthy into the galactic community, we instead follow members of a backwater civilization, largely locked out of the galactic community and its advanced technologies. Namely, us. And the us of SG1 is one of the most recognizable us's in science fiction. The canonical timeline of the show started the year it began airing, 1997. Watching relatable people of our time, relatively speaking, deal with the wild dystopian scenarios the show throws at them is a satisfyingly unique storytelling angle.
Why am I a friggin' Martian?
Hey, sweet! Wardrobe got you set up, and listen, you are not a Martian. You're from a super race of symbiotes. Little snake lives in your belly.
Throughout much of the series, the primary antagonists are a totalitarian theocracy led by parasitic aliens, the goa'uld. They use genetically modified humans, the Jaffa, like Teal'c, as hosts, incubators for their larval forms. Once a larva becomes mature, it takes control, dominating its host completely, Get Out style. Pretty dire shit, all told, particularly in how complicit many Jaffa are in their own exploitation. While the goa'uld do have access to various forms of brainwashing technology, their main method of control over the Jaffa is through ideology. It is this ideology that Teal'c, the Jaffa defector, spends quite a lot of the early seasons fighting. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the goa'uld are one of the most iconic parts of Stargate SG1. With swag like that, it was inevitable. Yet I would argue the most interesting dystopian societies in SG1 are those found in the Planet of the Week episodes. I was genuinely surprised how many strong one-off dystopian concepts were explored in even just the first season. Moreover, in evaluating the early dystopian episodes, a through line emerged. Specifically, many of their dystopias deal with genetics and illness. This isn't surprising when you consider when SG1 first aired. A year prior, Dolly the sheep was born via cloning, a landmark in our understanding of genetics, but for many, a grave cause for concern. A concern perfectly expressed in 1997's Gattaca, a classic piece of dystopian fiction where genes are used to discriminate. That future, thankfully, didn't quite materialize. But the horror of being betrayed by one's genes still rings true decades later. Take, for example, Season 1, Episode 8, Brief Candle, or, alternatively, The Planet That Makes You Old. Things start innocently enough. SG1 visits a planet called Argos, whose denizens were seemingly abducted from ancient Greece. They appear to be in the midst of quite the party.
Unto every man the Creator gives 100 blissful days. It is a sin not to celebrate.
This quickly goes sideways for Colonel O'Neill, though, as he devours what turns out to be a drugged marriage cake, and one of the locals, Kinfia, well, has her way with him. To the credit of the show, unlike a lot of media from this time period, this isn't played entirely for laughs, despite O'Neill's perfect one-liner.
From now on, we stick to rations.
This is just the beginning of O'Neill's problems, though. Come to find out, this is not a 100-day celebration. The denizens of the planet only live 100 days. Even a Solarian would wince at that lifespan. This genetic curse was inflicted upon them by Pelops, a goa'uld who wanted to speed up human evolution to engineer better hosts. Pelops might not have known very much evolutionary theory though, as due to a lack of any meaningful evolutionary pressures, it appears he only succeeded in engineering a society of apex party animals. Regardless, Pelops did this with some kind of nanite virus. A nanite virus that, much to O'Neill's chagrin, is, transmissible. After contracting it, he rapidly begins aging. It's interesting that this is a nanite virus specifically, as this was a few years before Deus Ex, in which a nanite plague is a major plot point. Who knows, this could have been an influence. Anyway, the dystopia here is an interesting combination of three of the major categories I looked at in my research. It's a society, secretly dominated by aliens, controlling people through genetics, modified by advanced nanotechnology. Quite the jackpot. There's even a little grey goo adjacent moment back in the SGC. However, the situation is not resolved through this off-site research. General Hammond writes off the planet entirely, O'Neill included. Fortunately, O'Neill, utilizing his new crotchety old geezer powers, foments revolt against Pelops by giving the Argosians what must be one of the worst possible existential crises.
His kind kidnap people like you and take them to other worlds to be used as slaves!
This causes them to destroy the statue of Pelops, who quietly robbed them of all their years, symbolically releasing themselves from his control. O'Neill and Kinfia go for a long walk away from the village afterward. Upon their return, they find everyone else stuck in their nanite-induced sleep cycles, which should have been over by now. Turns out the statue they demolished contained some kind of Argos data block. This device had been sending out the sleep and wake signals for the nanites. Fortunately, Jack is able to get SG1 to come back and broadcast the wake signal, permanently freeing everybody, now that new commands are no longer being issued to the nanites. In what might be the biggest handwave in the series, Sam tells Jack that he will revert back to normal over time, that what the nanites were doing was only cosmetic, which we're definitely not meant to think about that one for too long, as one would think the Argosians would similarly be reverting to a bunch of newborns.
All of you are babies!
All told, Brief Candle is a very ambitious Season 1 episode, and it wouldn't be the last time weird age stuff happened to O'Neill either. Season 1's The Broca Divide is another good example of a biological dystopia, as well as being one of the very first Planet of the Week episodes. The planet in question strangely seems to be tidally locked between a light side and an obviously day for night side. The denizens of this dark black forest are Stone Age Neanderthal types, complete with the pronounced caveman brows. The residents of the light side describe them as cursed and exile them from their society. Failing to find anything of strategic importance, the team heads back to the SGC, despite Daniel's protests.
Well, we should stay a while longer and study the society, learn how they've evolved the Minoan culture.
Unfortunately for them, they take a rather terrifying passenger with them back through the gate. A virulent neurological disease that reduces people to their most animalistic. It is this disease that caused the denizens of the dark part of the planet to effectively return to monkey, so to speak. As the infection spreads in Stargate Command, fights break out, as does fan service. Teal'c and Daniel, the only ones left unaffected by the disease, are quickly sent back to the planet with a mission to get some blood from the unaffected locals. Daniel is kidnapped by the residents of the Shadow Zone, leaving Teal'c to complete the mission solo. Teal'c requests their blood, in perhaps not the most diplomatic way.
If you will not help me find my friend, then I must have a sample of your blood.
Our blood?
Blood is our life force.
Failing this, he knocks out 2 of the guards and takes their blood by force. This has great quest solution of last resort in a CRPG energy, and I'm kind of here for it. Following the retrieval of the untouched blood, a secret weapon against the virus is revealed. Fucking Claritin. Turns out the virus feeds off histamine. After being injected with a powerful antihistamine, Jack is back.
Colonel O'Neill?
Lucy, I'm home.
I am not Lucy.
I know that. It's a reference to an old TV. Never mind, open the door.
I will summon the doctor.
No, come on, I'm fine. Back to being myself. Just open up.
I cannot be certain you're back to being yourself. You refer to me as Lucy.
Following this, the team loads up with tranq rifles, filled with antihistamine darts, and they rescue Daniel, aggressively curing everyone they come across in the forest. They also pledge to share the knowledge of how to cure people of the illness. An unambiguously good ending for the planet, even if we never actually learn its common name.
We have successfully traveled eons across both space and time through the Fargate to get free cable.
I think it's a Stargate.
It's the Fargate. F. It's different from that movie which I have never seen.
Not all of the dystopian societies the team visits are easily overcome. You might not be surprised that Stargate SG1 has quite a few 1984-style dystopias where force or deception are used to subjugate a population. Season 2's Prisoners, for instance, is a striking example. SG1 inadvertently stumbles upon somebody running from the authorities of their world, and is subsequently charged with aiding and abetting their escape. The judicial system of this planet is overseen by the Taldor, an unseen and absolute force. The Taldor put SG1 on trial, and it does not go well for them. The Taldor's idea of justice is one of zero tolerance. All violators, no matter how small, are sent through the Stargate to a planet the Taldor use as a prison, Hadante, for the rest of their lives. Right off the bat, it's impossible to avoid comparison to Next Generation's Justice, an episode where Wesley runs afoul of a civilization where every infraction is punishable by death. Kind of a bonkers episode in general, though I'm sure quite a few Star Trek fans supported this system of justice, at least in this particular instance. Anyway, our heroes find themselves trapped in the underground ruins of a fallen civilization with nary a linking book to escape with. More to the point, no dial-home device to activate the gate with either. SG1 quickly run afoul of the other prisoners, but are rescued by a mysterious woman named Linnea. Linnea quietly takes center stage in the episode. Right from her introduction, she has a neon sign on her forehead saying Machiavellian.
There are two ways, and two ways only, to control a society. Through fear or through hope.
Somehow, SG1 doesn't quite pick up on this, though they do notice how much she terrifies the other prisoners. Linnea has some pretty incredible powers. For one thing, she must have maxed out the Bog Witch skill tree because she can create biological cold fusion with her concoctions. She also has the uncanny ability to rapidly learn and extrapolate information. Oh, and she can casually cure blindness. In addition to all of this, she even has gaslight gatekeep girl boss powers that she uses to make everyone, including SG1 themselves, believe that SG1 won a prison fight against the toughest prisoners, putting them at the head of the pecking order, quietly moving things in the direction she's after. Eventually, using Linnea's power vines, SG1 manually dials the gate to escape while everybody is eating their daily gruel. Only one other person makes it out, the man who Linnea cured of his blindness. Now there's a real interesting ethical question here that the show skips past. Given the extreme nature of the system of justice putting people here, it's likely that a non-trivial number of people are unjustly imprisoned. So the question becomes, does SG1 have a moral obligation to break anybody else out with them? To maybe let everybody out, or even just to serve as temporary arbiters and choose who to take with them? Not exactly embodying the spirit of Eugene V. Debs, SG1 instead chooses the Irish goodbye. Had SG1 engaged more with their fellow prisoners, they might have been better prepared for Linnea's deception. It is only through conversation with the lone other escapee that they come to know Linnea's frightening nom de plume.
First thing I see, Destroyer of Worlds.
Yeah, oops. Sam excitedly just gave her the full run of the base's computer systems, which she instantly uses to glean Stargate addresses, hack the base, and dial out, leaving a polite, if deeply foreboding, message. Unfortunately, the series would not really pay this off. Linnea only makes an appearance in one other episode, past and present, a season later. And even then, it's not really her because of mass amnesia shenanigans. Don't get me wrong, it's a good episode, but I feel like they could have done a few more episodes with her. Maybe the actress had other commitments. Another good example of dystopian domination can be found in Season 4's Beneath the Surface. This episode features a civilization riding out an ice age in a domed city. This city is powered by a literal underclass of exploited workers. Critically, these workers are kept completely ignorant of the city above them's existence, even undergoing memory wipes. Any lingering memories of their previous lives are written off as night sickness. It's not hard to imagine this society as a potential far future epilogue to the game Frostpunk, after having maxed the order path and then some. You can even see the lights of cars in the background crisscrossing on sky bridges. Pretty cursed to use cars in a city this concentrated, but I digress. Keeping the exploited workers ignorant of the rest of society is especially galling in that it takes advantage of their solidarity, as they believe the burdens are being shared equally.
We're helping our people survive an ice age.
Yeah, what's more important than that?
Make no mistake though, this is a Snowpiercer. A Snowpiercer where the very existence of the front of the train is concealed. I would argue this makes this scheme terrifyingly more effective, at least until SG1 shows up. Upon discovering this exploitation, Jack is less than cordial.
Very impressive.
Too bad it's a lie.
It's worth pointing out that all hitherto existing societies are, to various extents, lies built on the exploitation of the poor that hide that exploitation through various means, but his outrage at this specific society is of course fully justified. Jack goes on to declare,
I will not recommend trade with a culture that enslaves its own people.
I don't think it's a stretch here to say that symbolically, Jack is embodying a contemporary American value that many wish America actually held. Much of Stargate SG1 can be understood as being in search of an aspirational, noble America doing right in the universe, this moment especially. Whereas the real America, well, as long as it's only happening to prisoners, and the raw materials of chocolate stay cheap, most look the other way. Regardless of this harsh reality, it is undeniably compelling to hear O'Neill draw this hard line. Administrator Calder is very quick to dismiss Jack's concerns.
This system of government has allowed our culture to survive an ice age.
Again, very much echoing Wilford's conflation of survival with exploitation for the benefit of a few in Snowpiercer. Anyhow, for daring to impugn the dignity of his society, and likely to prevent SG1 from harming trade relations, Calder has SG1's memories erased, and throws them into the system they dared to criticize, working in the vast underground power plant. There they start new lives, believing themselves to be transferred from the mines. Sam, ever diligent and thoughtful, quickly puts forward an idea for automating the pressure release valves to the manager of the plant, but Calder rejects this out of hand.
If we didn't have to regulate the pressure manually, it would free up workers for other tasks.
Maybe one day she could increase productivity to the point where we don't even need workers.
What would be so wrong with that?
And how would the people of the city react when there was less to go around? When they had to make room for workers?
Swell guy, isn't he? The plant manager informs Sam there will be no improvements, which she is befuddled by. Later on, when venting to Jack, Jack provides some surprisingly actionable process improvement management advice.
You should go back to her in a couple of days, offer up something small. Maybe you gotta work into the big stuff.
O'Neill is indeed a man of many talents, but I was not expecting change management to be one of them. While Sam tries to wrap her mind around the contradiction she encountered, the other elements of SG1 begin to remember their past lives. Teal'c remembers first and is quickly re-imprinted to keep him quiet. Daniel dreams of going through the Stargate, and Jack remembers an old friend.
I remember something. There's a man. He's bald and wears a short-sleeved shirt, and somehow he's very important to me. I think his name is Homer.
Eventually they start meeting every night, attracting Calder's attention, who orders the manager of the plant to have them dealt with. Now, unlike in Snowpiercer, a person in a leadership position actually has a change of heart when being asked to casually eliminate people.
At first, I thought it was necessary to protect the city, but now things have gone too far.
Symbolically, I like this a lot. Progress like this surely requires many sets of hands from many different kinds of workers, even those who have preferences between Herman Miller and steel case chairs. And putting one's job or even life at risk for a cause is admirable, to say the least. Unfortunately for her, Administrator Calder saw this betrayal coming. He and two guards enter her office armed with deadly repainted Nintendo zappers. She takes a hit too expensive to show, but Teal'c wakes up and assists SG1 in subduing Calder and his minions. Jack wants to leave, but Daniel recognizes they have a moral obligation here to fulfill. Jack implores the workers to wake up.
They've been hiding it from you your entire lives.
It's a lie.
But many do not believe him, so he takes radical symbolic action.
You want proof?
Fortunately, nobody seems to have been hurt by the shattered glass, which would have detracted quite a bit from the moment. Jack has quite literally shed light on the true shape of their political world. More impressively, unlike in Prisoners, Jack pledges to take all of the workers with him as refugees.
You and your people can do your own shoveling for a while.
You're destroying a way of life.
That's a shame.
O'Neill almost certainly doesn't have the authority to offer this, but I like to believe he still got away with it. While the politics and logistics of handling interstellar refugees are never meaningfully brought up in the show, symbolically it is deeply American to accept refugees. Though many have, regrettably, forgotten the famous words etched on the Statue of Liberty. Again, SG1's actions here read more as the actions of an idealized America than of contemporary America. One could even uncharitably characterize this as merely part of an American savior complex. I won't deny that. But there's still something beautiful in this moment of liberation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to travel through time. I bid you adieu.
Some of the most compelling dystopias of the show can be found in alternate visions of Earth, seen either through time travel or quantum mirror shenanigans. Often this is used as consequence-free stakes raising to demonstrate what will happen if SG1, or more broadly, the Stargate program, fails against a series antagonist. I don't want to undersell this, they went to this particular well quite often. When it's used in one-offs, it makes Earth the planet of the week, quite an effective framing device. Take, for instance, the delightfully anachronistically titled 2010. The episode takes place 10 years after the usual goings-on of the show, which is now more than 10 years in the past, of course. It shows a past future where the Stargate program has ostensibly been wildly successful, where Earth allied with the Ashen, an alien empire willing to share their technology, and vanquish the goa'uld. The plot begins with a medal ceremony for our heroes, where other famous sci-fi stories containing the word star might end. The Ashen have even provided tremendous advances in medical technology.
We've all taken the anti-aging vaccine, the anti-cancer vaccine, and now the Ashen have these medical machines that can reverse tissue damage and mend broken bones. I mean, where does that leave me?
Yet despite this, all is not well. Samantha Carter makes an unfortunate discovery with the help of Dr. Fraser. She has been rendered infertile, despite her Ashen doctor telling her everything was normal. Later on, Sam arrives at work, where she has been working with an Ashen on a project to turn Jupiter into a star. Notably, the title of this episode, 2010, is an homage to the critically underrated sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which similarly dealt with a Jupiter ignition. Gives me shivers every time. Anyway, after convincing her Ashen manager to let her have access to the secretive Ashen computer network to run simulations for the project, she and Dr. Fraser dig for more information.
Are you in?
Not yet.
The medical subcorps has its own code. You're not going to be able to access.
I'm in.
Amusingly, Carter is one of a precious few science fiction characters who could credibly hack an alien supercomputer in 3 seconds. They make a terrifying discovery.
Well, if I'm reading this properly, the worldwide birth rate has dropped almost 91% in the last 2 years.
What?
Yes, obviously it stretches credibility that nobody would notice this, but just go with it. Watching this back in the day was one of the first times I had ever seen a quiet alien invasion story. The other time I can recall was in Gene Roddenberry's Earth Final Conflict. I was only able to watch the first half of each episode before I needed to leave for school because of its bizarre morning time slot. I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure something like this was happening there. I swear though, the show is about as forgotten as I've ever seen a sci-fi property. Have you ever even heard of Gene Roddenberry's Earth Final Conflict? Sound off in the comments. Anyway, after bailing on work, Sam and friends calmly discuss the fate of humanity over dinner.
I mean, the Ashen can convert planets into stars. You don't think they could control the media if they wanted to?
Alright, so I can't go any further without saying this. This episode, when viewed contemporarily, lends itself to some rather dangerous allegories. It's not even remotely a stretch to contemporarily read this as some kind of argument for the legitimacy of the replacement conspiracy theory, to say nothing of the crank anti-vax sterility angle. Though I choose to believe I'm merely seeing these angles because of the reactionary waves of recent years. Certainly not as anything intended by the writers.
This way they didn't have to fire a shot. It's slow, methodical, painless.
But it's still more than a little unsettling. They conclude that humanity's fate in this timeline is more or less sealed. that their only hope is to erase the timeline by using Stargate-based time travel, which they inadvertently discovered in the much-beloved episode 1969.
So, your thing, what's it symbolize? Peace?
Slavery. To false gods.
Right on.
Greatly to the show's credit, they discuss the ethics of self-terminating a timeline by using time travel. An ethical topic that I would not see covered again until the recent season of Strange New Worlds. This is an argument that Jack comes out swinging on. Turns out Jack has been solipsism maxing for a while now, as nobody listened to his warnings about the Ashen. Needless to say, he refuses to help them.
And the single most pressing issue in my life is whether or not to get a dog.
Fortunately, he was just being tsundere though, and sneaks into the SGC with them. They're trying to grab a GDO from the exhibits, the device that sends a code to open the iris in the past. They're surprised by Walter, the gate tech, working now tending the museum exhibits. Fortunately, Jack is there with a perfectly executed persuasion check to keep him from narking. Unfortunately for them, they find out that the remaining working GDO is in the White House. The one in the SGC is just a replica. This causes Carter to loop her husband into the plot. As a planetary ambassador, he's one of the only people capable of getting it. His response to finding out about the mass infertility is rather telling.
The birth rate has been cut over 90%.
It's supposed to be a third of that.
You knew.
The Shin insisted on it.
Oh my God.
Honey, they see further ahead than we do. They knew that if we didn't limit growth, we wouldn't...
Is that what you call this?
Population was unsustainable. Without drastic measures, the Shin didn't think we were worth investing in.
Dude fell for flimsy eco-fash rhetoric hard. Fortunately, on this front, the show is absolutely clear in establishing this rhetoric as nonsense. Sam cajoles him into swapping the president's GDO with their replica. He is successful, but demands Sam stay out of the caper after this. Jack agrees to this. Soon thereafter, the algorithm Sam designed to look for solar flares capable of rerouting the gate's wormhole through time gets a hit. Side note, check out this reflection here. This is actually pretty impressive for television animation from 2001. Speaking of 2001, it's a good thing the episode aired early in the year, as odds are pretty good we'd have never seen it if it was scheduled to air in Q4, entirely because of what happens next. In a scene that is simultaneously dated, yet eerily right on time, SG1 are about to do some big T at the United States Interplanetary Airport.
We carry these for ceremonial purposes only.
I'm sorry, but you'll have to let me have it.
Very well.
The show is not subtle about calling it this.
Please evacuate the building immediately.
Our heroes fight valiantly against more wall-mounted guns to endanger Defray, but they fall one by one. Carter, refusing to stand on the sidelines any longer, charges in and successfully sends Jack's note to the past. In the present timeline ending sequence, Jack picks up the note gingerly deposited on the ground. You really have to appreciate the unnerving vibe here of picking up a note in your own handwriting covered in blood. Fortunately, Carter understands exactly what the note represents, and also likely understands the sacrifice required to send it. This wouldn't be the last we hear of the Ashen, though. A season later, they followed up this story with 2001, where the team visits them on a different world, not knowing at first they're associated with the address the note references. They come tantalizingly close to making the same mistakes that doomed the 2010 timeline. Fortunately, a little subterranean exploration reveals their plan.
Would you read this aloud for me? I couldn't quite translate it.
Of course. Sterility.
We never hear from the Ashen again, and good riddance, though their absence is somewhat aberrant in how large an empire they are implied to control. Funnily enough, the very next episode after 2010, Absolute Power, is a stealth Darkest Timeline episode, though it shows its hand at the midpoint with a year time skip and off-screen major character death. Absolute Power starts out with what seems like a major series plot point: the reappearance of a Harcesis, a child of two goa'uld system lords who has the genetic memory of both. This particular Harcesis, Shifu, was brought up by a friendly ancient, a powerful ascended being, rather than any one of the goa'uld. The kid speaks mostly in Zen koans.
A spark lights a flame, but the candle will only burn as long as the wick.
Now, despite him having the genetic memory of the goa'uld within him, he is currently suppressing those tainted memories, as his adoptive parent, Oma, taught him. However, the gang desperately want to get at the technology in those memories to defend themselves from the goa'uld, and debate having him remember.
I mean, think about what we'd be exposing him to. We'd be flooding his mind with the thoughts of 1,000 Hitlers.
Daniel appeals to Shifu personally, seeking to be blessed with this knowledge. Surprisingly, the request seems to be granted. From this point on, Daniel has become Evil Daniel. Evil Daniel is kind of a dick.
I was unable to complete my Kelno Ream. What is of such importance that I should be summoned here immediately?
He even has visions of himself system lording over everyone. Daniel uses his knowledge to design orbital defense satellites, ostensibly to defend the Earth from invasion. Despite others wanting to inform Russia of this technology, he demands they sit on it, violating their long-standing Stargate technology agreement. But it's all good, he has a plan.
But it's okay, I have a way of rendering their gate inactive.
Oh, okay. O'Neill's had just about enough of this and calls Evil Daniel out as he gets progressively weirder.
Something on your mind?
Your behavior, as a matter of fact.
Cut to 1 year later. I get that they likely had to do this to make the construction timeline for these defense satellites even remotely believable, but it might have been more effective for the final reveal to not have this time skip somehow, as it's basically a big neon sign that this episode will be reset. Anyhow, by this point, SG1 has completely disintegrated. Sam was forced out of the project, and Daniel now doesn't want anything to do with her. He even has her arrested. She implores Jack to try to visit Daniel to get him to see reason. Daniel, aspiring megalomaniac as he is, sees this coming. This remote viewing is also a subtle way to quietly keep the rule intact of not ever fully shifting the focus away from what the one real person is seeing in the constructed universe. Daniel welcomes Jack on the day of the satellite launch. They ring down to his gamer bunker and he shows off his battle station. After exhausting the show's folder of rocket launching stock footage, the defense satellite dispersal itself goes off without a hitch. It's worth mentioning that this is a hard violation of the Outer Space Treaty, which prohibits weapons from being placed in space, but it's clear we're pretty far past international law by this point. Russia and China start moving assets to intercept the satellites, so Daniel and the military use their newly launched weapon platforms to knock out a comically close satellite. To be fair, that is one way to keep everything in the same shot, but yeah, space fans might see a couple things wrong with this. It's also pretty interesting how far the alternate reality US military goes with all this. At the time, this felt like an utterly cartoonish escalation, but now it doesn't seem so far-fetched with the way things are going these days. But after the president starts leaning against escalation, Daniel takes full control of the system, and targets Moscow directly.
Like cutting your enemy's heart out with a scalpel.
As goofy as this whole situation is, that is a line that stays with me. Seeing Daniel out of control, Jack valiantly tries to stop him. Needless to say, Daniel was prepared for this, and Moscow is obliterated. And then everything just fades out. Fortunately for the Muscovites, much like Driver's San Francisco, this was all an elaborate coma dream. A coma dream Shifu had Daniel go through to teach him that
evil in my subconscious is too strong to resist.
Which, okay, sure, but that seems a long way to go for that lesson. Regardless, his job now finished, he completes his personal ascent to transcendence and leaves via the gate. A strange episode all around, really, but it was interesting to see Daniel go full Warlock mode.
I have invented a Stargate device that will allow us to travel to their dimension.
Technology running out of control is a classic form of dystopian science fiction. Even before Black Mirror took a bagger 288 to the genre, some of the most revered science fiction stories out there exemplify this category. It is entirely fitting that the most notable dystopia in Stargate SG1 can be found here. I won't mince words, the episode in question is what inspired this video in the first place, and it's one of the bleakest dystopian societies I've ever seen. I'm speaking of the 5th episode of Season 7, Revisions. Similar to Beneath the Surface, Revisions takes place on a devastated world, but instead of an ice age, this world has been poisoned by pollution. The surviving population of the planet lives under a powerful shield, whose technology fascinates Samantha Carter. At first blush, this civilization seems to be doing relatively fine, even if it is a bit strange that they abandoned most of their advanced technologies for a decidedly cottagecore lifestyle. The big exceptions, of course, being the dome above them and the Link, a wearable computer able to download information from a centralized repository directly to their brains. Anyhow, seeing the state of the world outside the dome, SG1 offers to relocate anybody who wants to leave, but the Council draws a hard line against this.
But we have everything we need right here.
It seems like they live in a bubble in both senses of the word. SG1 does find one taker, though.
You've offered to take us through the gate to another world?
Yeah, that's right.
Then Evan and I will come with you.
However, sometime later, he has a decidedly different outlook.
You have expressed a desire to live in a world where the sky is not artificial.
You must have me mistaken for someone else.
Oddly, their home moves to an entirely different part of the dome, too. The woman they were talking to on the council disappears as well, and the remaining council members deny any knowledge of her.
There hasn't been a woman on the council since the last election.
Quite eerie, all told. While this is going on, Carter works with Palin, the systems administrator of the village, to download the technical details of the bubble. But she notices an anomaly. The power readings have decreased since she last observed them, but Palin denies this up and down.
You see? No variation.
Carter reckons this power fluctuation indicates that the entire bubble could be at risk of collapse. Daniel is able to uncover the terrifying truth using the books at his local library, long since forgotten by everyone in favor of the Link.
So when the dome was first created, everyone signed a contract establishing communal land ownership rights. Look at the number.
No, that can't be.
There were originally over 100,000 people living here.
This is a stark contrast to how many were established to be living in the village earlier.
1,373.
Put another way, the population of this society has been reduced to a little over 1% of its original size, with the residents none the wiser. How did this happen? It was the Link. Far from merely being a source of knowledge, the Link is capable of rewriting people's memories, and even directly controlling them, allowing it to erase people as completely as if it were the narrator in the Stanley parable, having them leave the dome and erasing any evidence of their existence from people's memories. Charged with maintaining the society, it has been doing this for centuries to keep the population low enough to fit under the protective bubble, as their geothermal power supply slowly waned away. This dystopia is not entirely unlike how I imagine the thought control social engineering choice in Alpha Centauri to be, though at least in that there's presumably a post-human hand at the wheel. Here, it is an unimpeachable algorithm. This algorithm doesn't appreciate SG1's scrutiny either, hardening the bubble dwellers' resolve against any questioning. It pushes a new fact that they instantly believe.
To be disconnected from the Link would cause instant death.
Big Brother wishes he was this effective. As a final measure, the algorithm even mobilizes the entire community against Jack and Teal'c, ready to remove them by force. But Sam is able to convince Palin to help after removing his Link. He issues a command to erase all memory of them, resolving the tense situation. Cut to later on, and the civilization is now fully prepared to take up SG1 on their offer of evacuation. Another victory for SG1's relocation program. Yet despite this, a pall is cast over the proceedings, as the residents come to grips with the fact that most of them will never know who is missing from their lives, except for Palin's wife, who SG1 met.
You know, in a way, I envy the others. They all must have lost somebody, but I'm the only one who knows for sure.
Well, that's heartbreaking, especially in that his wife was likely removed to keep the number down specifically because SG1 entered the community. All told, I believe the most direct reading of the allegory in this episode is one of deeply questioning the increasing centralization of the internet. I don't think it's a stretch to say the Link is a fairly on-the-nose theoretical endpoint of the concept. Revisions dropped in the middle of 2003, when the Wild West days of the early internet were unquestionably coming to an end, and the future shape of the internet was very much in the air. While the idea that bad actors or algorithms could seize total control of a society's supply of facts is pure science fiction, the fight over net neutrality is very real, and is waged to this day. But setting this perspective aside, I would like to propose an alternate reading. Bear with me here. This society has unknowingly turned itself over to an algorithm. An algorithm that rationalizes away contradictions at the speed of light. An algorithm quietly executing mass human sacrifice. While many people are deathly afraid of the large language model algorithms labeled by marketers as artificial intelligence, we already turned over society to the quote-unquote algorithm decades, if not centuries ago. The algorithm of maximizing profit. An algorithm need not only refer to a process executed by a computer, after all. What other way could we describe a society where profit has been put above the very health of its citizens? Where the algorithm quietly presides over a managed decline where we're not meant to remember the past? That our parents went to college for the price of the change in their pockets and a stick of gum, largely because of state-level subsidies that no longer exist. Where a single income used to be enough to afford a house and even support a family. All of these memories, largely erased in the mainstream consciousness, never to be talked about directly. These things were not stolen by foreigners, despite what reactionaries would have you believe. They were stolen by those who profit from this algorithm. It is only in recent years we have even begun to see the balance of power shift away from these forces, however slightly. So I would ask you to consider, what exists outside of the dome of our society? Who has been quietly sacrificed? What has the profit-maximizing algorithm asked you to memory hole for its convenience? There's an ocean of answers to this, of course, and I would legitimately be interested in hearing what you think. But I digress. I would be exceptionally surprised if the writers intended this reading, although it is very thematically interesting that the devastation of the planet is self-inflicted from rapid industrialization. One could see this entire episode as a sad epilogue to the planet's larger story, where history is repeating itself on a different scale. The profit algorithm destroyed their planet, likely eliminating millions, and now its smaller brother almost finished the job. Their victory in evacuation is slight. Their ancestors already lost against the real threat centuries ago. Let us hope that we are more successful. On a cheerier note, I want to briefly talk through Season 2's The Gamekeeper, which is an interesting counterpoint to Revisions. Once again, SG1 visits a civilization living under a dome. Really should start a drinking game for that at this point. Though this time, the planet outside the dome is lush and beautiful. They enter the dome and encounter the residents, attached to strange machines. They get too close and are themselves forcefully integrated. When they come to, Jack and Teal'c are trapped reliving one of Jack's memories, an operation that went south. They attempt to complete it successfully, but to no avail. The memory loops endlessly, giving them more and more chances to do it right. Meanwhile, Daniel and Sam are stuck in Daniel's memories of when he lost his parents in what would almost certainly be worthy of a well there's your problem safety third segment in the Stargate universe. Good times all around. Come to find out, this is all a virtual world run by the Keeper, who is sort of a demented dungeon master.
Well, if I told you that, it wouldn't be any fun, would it?
In truth, the dystopian aspects of this episode are rather understated. This is beyond a shadow of a doubt Stargate SG1's equivalent of a Q episode. That said, it's also kind of a Borg episode.
And your minds are very valuable to my residents, because you enrich and add value to our own.
The residents of this network have been stuck in this virtual world for millennia. After thoroughly exhausting all of their collective imagination, they are desperate for new material. I get why the Keeper wants to team here, as I too could watch SG1 for centuries. But the Keeper's methods prove to be unnecessarily cruel, and SG1 quickly decides they want no part in these games. It then comes out that the residents don't know that the world outside has recovered.
The world outside is uninhabitable. It has been poisoned and desecrated.
You are mistaken. Your planet is a fertile garden world.
We were victims of our own technology advancing faster than we could control it.
Notably, this is essentially the same situation that cursed the world in Revisions. Deeply annoyed with SG1's attempts to tell the residents about the outside world, the Keeper releases them from their simulator pods, and they return to the SGC. Or do they?
Besides, what's so bad about being in there? It sounds to me like you can experience all sorts of fascinating things.
Oh, I'm looking for the edges of a mask.
What?
You're obviously not the real General Hammond.
It's also important to note here that despite all outward appearances, this is in no way ripping off The Matrix, as The Matrix would, in fact, not be released for another year. Anyway, after breaking out of the virtual SGC room they were locked in, SG1 encounters some of the residents. O'Neill agrees to show them their world.
Where are we going? Back through the gate to show them what their planet looks like. In our memories. Before the virtual reality. Leave me alone.
Jack subtly riffing on how convoluted this has become is pretty great. To top it all off, the climax of the episode is, of all things, a goddamn Scooby-Doo chase sequence. I half expected them to use the virtual nature of the world for a Doors gag. The chase even continues outside of the virtual world. It comes out that the Keeper has known that the outside world has been habitable for some time now. He's horrified that his residents may destroy the world again, or even just his garden. But SG1 puts it to him.
Perhaps your people will not make the same mistakes again.
Yeah, you're big on giving people a second chance, aren't you?
A very hopeful vision indeed. We even see the residents finally touching grass after 1,000 years of VR gaming. The Keeper is very lucky that this is all played largely for laughs, as one could easily imagine them being quite miffed at him for keeping the truth of the world away from them all this time. Regardless, a strong episode overall. A solid execution of the virtual world concept that aged quite well, even if some of the CGI did not. Popping forward violently in the show's timeline again, I wanted to quickly mention Season 7's Avenger 2.0, largely because it hits on a kind of cursed technological dystopia I'm all too familiar with, that of ancient, badly understood enterprise software. The episode centers around a scientist named Dr. Felger, who could charitably be described as, "We have pre-Atlantis Rodney McKay at home." In a desperate bid to save his job, he comes up with the idea of a virus that could prevent gate travel on an enemy world by scrambling the gate's coordinate system. Carter recommends his proposal to General Hammond, and they work together on it, using C# of all things to code the virus. Big props to the team for somehow getting Windows running on freaking alien crystals. After they test the virus on a world controlled by a system lord named Ball, a dire situation emerges. Gates start becoming unusable, spreading outward from where the virus was deployed, stranding many SG teams off-world. Turns out gates automatically propagate code to each other, spreading the virus all over the galaxy. Although Felger swears his update couldn't have caused this. Felger tries to push a fix, but
It didn't work! It should have worked. You know, maybe there's something wrong with the upload. You can upload better, huh?
after talking Felger off the ledge, Carter and him gate to the world they deployed the virus on. They attempt to deploy a targeted antivirus as a last-ditch attempt to fix the network. Felger notices that modifications have been made to his virus. Surprisingly, his code was modified by Ball's forces, which, I shit you not, implies the existence of a highly skilled goa'uld .NET programmer. They get spotted by Ball's forces, and Carter desperately holds them off as best she can while Felger programs as fast as he can. Moments before they are overwhelmed by Jaffa, an Al-Kesh mysteriously shows up and saves their bacon. Surprise, Jack and Teal'c have a sweet new ride. It kind of rules how this implied off-screen adventure is by itself more interesting than a lot of whole episodes of other shows. Anyway, Felger finally deploys the fix correctly and the gate network is saved. This whole ordeal definitively proving that if you want to deploy enterprise software, you really need to be on the ball.
Ever since the Cold War, the US government has been working on a secret project to build a doorway into the imagination. It is called Project Imagination Doorway.
That's not very imaginative.
Stargate SG1 might be the most American science fiction show ever, shot almost entirely in Canada. You can almost taste the 90s era optimism about what America could do for the world. As I mentioned earlier, the show offers a unique catharsis in seeing an arm of the American military doing unambiguous good across the galaxy. For example, it is shown in the choice to abandon the technology of the genocidal drone pilot clones rather than working with them. A clear line drawn, a value upheld. The phrase has been well-deservedly drained of all of its meaning by the events of the previous few decades, but SG1 are, non-ironically, the good guys spreading freedom. American exceptionalism given a positive sci-fi glow-up. One could also probably write a whole slew of essays on the subtext of the choice to make the entire universe speak English, instantly making the oppressed more relatable, and also negating a major part of the movie, but that's neither here nor there. The later seasons of SG1 even show the beginnings of America as a space empire, prime beneficiaries of their tremendously successful single-nation XCOM project. But to the show's infinite credit, it did not stop at what would otherwise have been an extremely easy win.
Colonel, the United States is not in the business of interfering in other people's affairs.
Since when, sir?
While this whips, it is tempered by unreality.
Since this administration was elected.
Now I can accept faster-than-light travel, alternate realities, parasitic aliens, and all, but I just can't find a notion of a good United States president believable. Regardless, this contradiction between the hardline America of the past and the alleged new values-driven America is explored throughout the show to great effect. This is even shown in the very first episode, where the SGC almost mistakenly nukes Abydos in retaliation for Apophyse's incursion. The show wants you to enjoy America doing the right thing, because it knows America has done many, many very wrong things. And again, to the show's credit, it puts names and faces on those who resist this changing of the guard. Specifically, the opposition in this battle for the soul of the American Empire is the NID, the National Intelligence Department. Not exactly a subtle nod to the similarly named clandestine agency responsible for many of the darker chapters in numerous other nations' histories. It is admittedly a bit limiting of the critique to centralize the opposition in this one bad apple agency, yet having them at all was a bold choice, and I can't help but respect the writers for going as far as they did. The NID even briefly ran their own twisted version of the Stargate program, pilfering from the advanced civilizations that the SGC had been engaging with diplomatically, until it was shut down in an elaborate interplanetary sting operation. This concretely demonstrated their vision for how the program should be run. The NID, true to form, are also all about the cloak and dagger stuff. In chain reaction, they put General Hammond's family at risk, forcing him to temporarily resign. Their most notable figure, Colonel Mayborn, even uses his knowledge to become the king of an off-world medieval society. Real peach, that guy. One of the most interesting episodes where the conflict with the NID comes to a head is in Season 2's Touchstone. Now, while the off-world society at issue in Touchstone is not, in itself, a dystopia to begin with, in the negative space of the episode you can see the outlines of a very real strain of colonial dystopia that has and continues to wreak havoc in real life. We start the episode in the SGC briefing room, as SG1 discusses a fascinating piece of technology, the eponymous Touchstone, held by the denizens of planet Madrona. Now you might think at first blush the show is committing a flagrant violation of the principle of show don't tell, but they are going somewhere with this, I assure you. Upon gating back to Madrona, they are greeted by absolutely terrible weather, and the Madronans themselves. Come to find out, the Touchstone was stolen by another group of people, presumably from Earth. After a tense standoff, they agree to get the Touchstone back before the turbulent weather completely destroys their society. Now real quick, I can't help but comment on their attire here. While the story is explicitly about colonialism, making the indigenous people literal grass-skirted natives might have been a bit much. But not being any kind of indigenous person, I can't really speak to the level of accuracy of whatever they were going for. Regardless, they are infantilized quite a bit over the course of the episode, which doesn't read great in this kind of story. Even still, I don't think it negates the overall message of the episode. Anyhow, back at the SGC, O'Neill briefly accuses General Hammond of having another SG team pilfer the Touchstone, but he denies it categorically.
I don't appreciate your implication, Colonel.
Meanwhile, the rest of the team notices a cavalcade of extreme weather events, which, believe it or not, were actually rare back in 1998. Through analyzing recent gate activity, they also discover that the second Earth Stargate was used. General Hammond tries to reach out to the president, but is stonewalled at every turn. He quickly comes to the realization that something is afoot.
Back when the SG program began, there was a philosophical skirmish about its mandate. Some people wanted to make sure that any and all discoveries were brought back, regardless of considerations like interplanetary diplomacy.
Directly spelling out the nature of the conflict at the heart of the episode, though not quite framing it in explicitly colonial terms. Hammond quietly dispatches the gang to Area 51 to check on the second gate. Here, the team comes face to face with Colonel Mayborn, who Teal'c has a few choice words for.
In my culture, I would be well within my rights to dismember you.
O'Neill is similarly direct.
If you're looking for specific answers, I'd ask that you be a little less cryptic with your questions.
Fine. Where's the damn touchstone?
But Mayborn plays coy and offers to show them the second gate to assuage their concerns. They unpack the gate and make a startling discovery.
Colonel. This gate is plastic.
It's deeply funny to me that if the NID hadn't cheaped out on their Stargate replica, this might have been overlooked. The ruse exposed, Mayborn defends the NID's actions. Dejected, they return to Madrona and send a MALP through the gate to try to locate the second gate on Earth, overloading the gate to ensure the wormhole jumps to the non-SGC gate. In the logic of the show, they probably didn't need to do this specifically from Madrona, but it's a good reminder of how perilously close the world is to destruction. The Madronans berate them for not returning with the touchstone. Regardless, they succeed in sending the MALP through, and even receive telemetry from satellites on Earth. But before they can get an exact fix, the MALP is silenced by the devastating power of a 9mm fired at a weird angle. Really though. MALPs look to be built like BattleBots. Kind of wish they had sprung for some kind of fake space bazooka or something with a little more kick. All they managed to find out is that the second gate is somewhere in southern Utah. However, this is enough for General Hammond to reach out to one of his connections, and they have an extremely X-Files style conversation. Though unlike in the X-Files, this conversation actually leads to something. The assumed location of the gate in hand, General Hammond orders SG1 to the NID airstrip, notably ordering them to...
Under no conditions are you to fire on them, understood?
As SG1 arrives at the airstrip, a C-17 is implied to have landed, meaning that they are running out of time. They quickly infiltrate the hangar where the gate is stored, ambushing the NID types inside. Things quickly go sideways though when one of the NID agents dials the gate and they make a break for it. O'Neill lays down some suppressive fire to prevent them from escaping with the touchstone, but they still escape through the gate to an unknown destination. It's notable that Jack explicitly violated an order given not 5 minutes ago, but that is kind of his thing, and it was for a good reason. They return the touchstone to Madrona. Promises made, promises kept. The touchstone is activated, and Madrona quickly returns to its desktop background quality beauty. Back on Earth, the other Stargate is quote-unquote permanently retired by welding it shut. However, this retirement would be considerably less than permanent, as a season later, this gate would become the active gate in the SGC for replicator-related reasons. All in all, Touchstone does a great job establishing the underlying values of the show. While again, I wouldn't fault anybody for pointing out how this fits right into the American savior narrative, it is noteworthy that it also critiques the use of American power. Allegorically, the touchstone could be a stand-in for any desired natural resource controlled by an indigenous culture. Many seasons later, this allegory would be further refined in the episode Enemy Mine, where the Stargate program is considering displacing an indigenous group of Unas so they can mine a motherlode of Naquita. Again, credit to the creators, the show did not shy away from these difficult issues, arguably considerably ahead of the mainstream discourse. Speaking of difficult issues, I want to talk through the Season 3 episode, Scorched Earth. Much like the previously discussed episodes, this episode offers the catharsis of seeing America doing good in the universe, yet Scorched Earth goes perhaps the furthest of any of these types of episodes, solving a dispute ostensibly on the same order of difficulty as bringing peace to the Middle East. Although I wouldn't say this episode is an exact allegory for any of those conflicts. In fact, I think the writers went to great lengths to avoid inviting that exact comparison. That said, keep your ears on. I think you might hear some familiar through lines. We join SG1 triumphantly celebrating with the Incarans, a formerly dispossessed people that the SGC relocated to this planet. While humanoid, the Incarans require a very specific kind of atmosphere, or they deteriorate rapidly, going blind or even dying. They were torn from their original homeworld by the goa'uld using ships. As their homeworld has no Stargate, it was lost to history. As their required kind of atmosphere is so exceptionally rare, finding this new planet for them was quite the victory for the SGC's budding interstellar refugee program. But the revelry ends quickly as a fleeing resident of another village calls for help. They find themselves staring down a massive ship of some kind going all Fire Nation on them. They come to the conclusion that the ship is a terraformer of some kind, which, if you're unfamiliar with the concept, terraforming is the act of changing the environment of a planet through massive-scale geoengineering to be more suitable to a given species. This particular species is apparently sulfur-based, requiring quite an exotic environment. In real-life biological terms, sulfur-based life seems rather unlikely, as sulfur only has half the valence of carbon. But set that aside, it's not about the xenobiology. After successfully sending a signal to the ship, they get beamed on board. Luckily for them, the ship recognized their biology and modified its internal atmosphere to be compatible. Also, you really have to hand it to the production design here. The mysterious bubblers really add to the ambiance. SG1 make the surprising discovery that the ship itself is ripe with biological samples required to generate members of the alien species itself, making the terraformer also a colony ship of a sort. They are greeted by Lotan, a biomechanical android created by the ship to deliver a message. That message...
Unfortunately for your friends, once the process has begun, it must be completed.
Well then. Throughout the episode, Lotan has some Data-ish vibes about him, though he lacks Data's awareness and feline companion. Lotan introduces them to the Gadmir, the race that built the ship, presented here in their traditional T pose.
However, they were also peaceful and fell victim to a superior military power.
So this story isn't as straightforward as a powerful alien race dominating another. The Gadmir, too, are refugees of a sort, with this ship representing the last gasp of their civilization. And when they started the terraforming process, the Incarans were not on the planet. And now that the process has started, it must be completed here. Yet doing so would mean the elimination of the Incarans' new home, and the Incarans themselves. As I mentioned earlier, I believe the writers went to great lengths to craft a scenario where there's no clear real-life analog. This is a worthy sci-fi dilemma on its own merits. Though one could object to the comedically bad timing of the Stargate program in setting the Incarans up on the planet when they did. On a cosmic scale, what were the odds the terraformer would show up at the planet a few, weeks or months before they were relocated? But I think that can be excused for the sake of exploring the scenario, this civilization-scale deadlock. It is in the ethical debate of the situation that the episode draws its most interesting questions.
Well, I don't mean to sound insensitive to the Incarans, but we'd be interfering with the rebirth of an entire civilization. If you believe Lotan, an incredibly advanced, civilized, and peaceful one.
So the best society wins here?
No, I wasn't saying that.
Daniel Jackson is often cited as the moral compass of SG1, though it is a bit callous on his part to initially gloss over the implied loss of Incaran lives in arguing for the Gadmir side of things. While the show doesn't dwell on it, this question of the best society reads to me as not so subtly a question often deployed in the context of colonialism. In my experience, it's far less prevalent these days, but I can't help but recall witnessing people make the argument that it's not merely inevitable, but morally just for a technologically superior force to violently overcome a weaker one. The colonial version of progress. Not that I think Daniel is taking the argument to that conclusion. Jack has a very different perspective on the conflict.
We're talking about a bunch of freeze-dried aliens whose civilization was lost a long time ago. The Incarans are there now.
Which I think this too is an important moral consideration. How does one weigh the potential future lives of an extinct alien civilization against the already living Incarans? For Jack, the choice is easy.
I say we throw everything we've got at that ship.
Moreover, he bottom lines his argument with this.
But we spent months getting to know these people. They trusted us, and we screwed up.
Which could be applied to a variety of different United States foreign policy contexts, particularly a few that would arise in the coming decades after the episode aired in 2000. I'm not gonna claim this line is an intentional allegory for anything, but it's aged interestingly. The show doesn't quite fully explore the space implied by these questions, but the argument sets up a deeply divided SG-1. Despite Jack O'Neill's conviction to defend the Incarans, you can see his discomfort and desire for any alternative that avoids the annihilation of a civilization.
It's a no-win situation. But we're not going to sit around and watch these people get slaughtered.
And you're willing to blow up that ship to do
Give
that?
me another choice.
Well, I don't have one at the moment.
Apparently, time is a factor here.
Jack orders Sam to turn the Naquita reactor they'd intended for the Incarans to use into a bomb to stop the terraformer. Sam has severe reservations about this, but begins work immediately. Meanwhile, Daniel takes Jack's request quite literally. He rejoins Lotan on the ship, as Lotan enjoys the traditional Gadmir T-pose. Daniel implores Lotan to change his mind, but Lotan is unmoved.
Tough luck.
He introduces Daniel to some traditional Gadmir music, which I'm sure is the only thing Gen Alpha will listen to someday.
This music has not been heard in over 1,000 years.
It's nice.
Wait, hold on, I have something for this.
This music has not been heard in over 1,000 years. This music has not been heard in over 1,000 years. This music has not been heard in over 1,000 years. It sounds very unpleasant to me.
Anyway, after being continually stonewalled by Lotan, Daniel has him come out of his ship and meet the people he was created in the image of, and touch the grass of the planet before it is consumed. This cultural exchange may seem a bit hokey, but there really is something to be said for actually interacting with people who are in the process of being dehumanized. This can often radically change a person's moral calculus. Also, based Daniel.
See, sometimes hierarchical command structures don't allow you to consider all the possible options.
Once they return to the ship, Lotan discovers that Jack and Sam were trying to set him up the bomb. Credit to Jack for having the moral conviction to go through with his attempt to defend the Incarans. Thankfully, the overloading reactor is safely ejected though before it does any harm. Daniel tries one final time to appeal to Lotan's morality.
They had laws. Justice.
Yes.
Respect for life.
Yes.
Then how can their world be recreated through an act of mass murder?
Now, fully reckoning with the prospect of sacrificing one civilization for another, Lotan pauses the terraforming process to give the Incarans a reprieve. Daniel then succeeds on a massively consequential logic check and inquires about other planets the ship surveyed that didn't quite meet the terraforming criteria but would be suitable for the Incarans. They hit the jackpot. The ship surveyed the Incaran homeworld and has its exact location. The Incarans immediately accept the offer to relocate there.
We will gladly accept this offer to return to the home of our ancestors.
In the end, they get a lift from the terraformer ship, which will presumably return afterwards and successfully complete the terraforming process. What was previously going to be their demise became their salvation. Likely still a very strange feeling being on board that vessel. That discomfort aside, what was once a no-win situation became a win-win situation. Lotan even gets to stay with the Incarans, rather than being absorbed back into the ship. Regardless of whether any of this was intended to be allegorical for US foreign policy, seeing SG-1 pull off this impossibly unambiguously good ending is truly wonderful. So clean is the resolution that I would argue it can't meaningfully be seen as aspirational, more a pure fantasy. But is that escapism so wrong? Perhaps if it's used as an attempt to demonstrate our current American values, or otherwise as cynical propaganda, but still. There's something undeniably compelling about the American project as imagined by Stargate SG1. It conjures up a heretofore unseen, actually great America. It's ludicrous, I realize, childish even at this point, to imagine America as a vessel for not merely collective action on behalf of its citizens, but collective action on behalf of all sentient life. Perhaps this too is something of a holdover of the utopian ethos of Star Trek: The Next Generation. On that note, I'm not going to throw out the cliché L word, but I think it could be said that Stargate SG-1 is a fascinating exploration of a transitory period many would like to imagine between the real dystopia of our selfish, violent capitalist world and the utopia of Star Trek. It's especially visible in these kinds of episodes. I would have loved to see the show fully complete this transformation, perhaps finally revealing the Stargate program and sharing all that had been learned, but sadly, that's not where the series went. I believe Stargate SG1 has always had far more going for it than it's been given credit for. A lot of it works as a period piece, capturing much of the 90s optimism and belief in the American project. Now, with the power of hindsight, we can see how ultimately misplaced much of that 90s optimism was. Yet I do not fault the show for this, because it was honest, far more so than its military science fiction label might otherwise imply. But even beyond its dreaming of an America that would not come to pass, the dystopian scenarios it conjured throughout the years remain some of the most interesting out there. Now, if only the powers that be could figure out how to make another actually good new series in its universe.